Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tutorial Tuesdays. Today, Joanna here from Copyhackers. Sarah is having technical difficulties, so hopefully she'll be able to join us in a bit. But for now, I'm going to be running this whole show by myself. Can you believe it? The things that I do. Cool. So other people are like, woohoo, I made it. Well done, you. I also had tech problems this morning, though. So it's like a weird tech day. It's like Google, just kidding, I was gonna make a Google Donald Trump joke. Okay, anyway. Okay, quick housekeeping before we dive into today's tutorial. Chat is where you can throw any of the comments you have as we're going. People are already saying cool things. Sonia Simona's here. Heather as well. Tech has been dodgy the past week for us. My actual keyboard died today, so I have to go to the Apple store and pick one up at lunchtime. So that's fun. Tuesday Techtorial, well done, Abby. Yes, the cats are back and they're in a mood. It's like the seasons are changing, I guess, and we have one cat there, and then the other one is around there. Okay, good. So now that we've got that covered, chat is where you put any thoughts that you have that you would like to share that are worth sharing. If you want them to go straight to me, just hit all panelists. I'm the only panelist today, so it'll go to me directly. I will not be able to answer them when I'm actually presenting. Most likely I will not be able to, but I'll do my best. If you want to just say hey to everybody or get in on a conversation, make sure you're sending that message in chat to everyone. Depending, it might say everyone for you or all attendees. Okay, cool. We also have the Q&A area. If you have questions at the end of this training today, this tutorial, and you want to ask them, you want to just make sure that they're in the queue so I don't miss them, then go ahead and put those in Q&A, and we will have time at the end of today's tutorial to take those. We are recording this, so let's dive in. Hi to everybody who is saying hi. Someone said I never got the tutorial link this time, but her name's Sierra? But you're here, so that's good. It worked out. That's awesome. People are saying feeling intrigued. Great topic today. Hey, Jake, thanks. Oh, you're using an old link. Okay, yeah, it works because once you register once, it'll probably be the same link for you all the time. Just so you know. Yeah, all right. So today's tutorial is on the conversion copywriting process. This is one I decided to do because, and this is gonna, anyway, I decided to do this one today because when you sign up for Copyhackers, like for a free ebook or whatever you opted in for, whatever lead magnet brought you to Copyhackers, you are redirected to a thank you page, the cats. You're redirected to a thank you page that asks you a question. And that question, some of you might know it because it's been up for a couple of weeks now, 2 weeks or something. That question is, what was going on in your life that brought you to sign up for, or whatever it might be, Copyhackers today? And one of the bigger trends that we're seeing in the responses is a lot of people who are like, I'm thinking of becoming a copywriter. And we regularly get emails from people who are like, look, my construction job is over, or I'm thinking of retiring, or I did retire, I used to be a teacher, and now I want to be a copywriter. So there are a lot of people who are still starting out, and we tend to kind of jump ahead to like, okay, you're writing copy, here's how to write an email. But some people are still just figuring this stuff out. So this tutorial is for you. If you are new to conversion copywriting or to any copywriting at all, and you want to get it right out of the gate, this will help you today. A lot of people sit down, like when they're writing copy, you sit down and you look at the screen and you start typing things. And you wonder why it doesn't feel right. Why it's like, okay, this is writing, but how is this going to get people to say yes to me? Like, how is like me thinking aloud on the page, even if it sounds nice, how is it going to convince people to say yes? And that's where you go like, oh no. And then you back up and you get imposter syndrome and you're like, oh man, there's so many things I need to learn. There probably are a lot of things to learn, it's true, but don't get overwhelmed by it. Let's start with the process. because when you're going to write copy that converts, you're not going to sit down and just start typing out your thoughts. That's not going to work. Good point, Elizabeth, me too. That's not going to work. Sitting down and doing that is just, it's going to cause all the problems I just mentioned. Here's what to do instead. It is a very, very simple 3-part process. You do not have to overcomplicate it. I teach this in the 10X Freelance Copywriter, which we're probably going to reopen again this November to start in January. This is what conversion copywriters know and need to know. Okay, really straightforward. It doesn't have to be a terribly long tutorial today. I'm going to share it with you now. Okay, you should be sharing my screen. 3 very simple steps. I will zoom in on that. Hold on, I'm just going to get rid of that. I'm sure you're seeing the, oh, my keyboard, I forgot that it's broken. Can that work? Cool. So you should see that up close. Now, this is unlikely to surprise anybody who's been writing copy for a while again. So this is, again, for newer people who are newer to copywriting and conversion copywriting in particular. We begin, and we always follow this 3-step process. So if you're working with a client, internal or external, there's never any part of this process that is optional. There might be smaller part, like this process might be more research and less validation sometimes, but a client should never say, oh, we don't need research and discovery, like don't worry about that, just get right into writing, we just want you to write it. Like I appreciate that you want to go do all this other stuff, but we just want you to write it. You're not going to do that. That's not what we do. We begin with research and discovery all the time, and this tends to be the biggest part of the work. And if it's not the biggest part of the work, 99% of the time it means you're doing it wrong. You need to find your message in the research and discovery phase. And then and only then, once you've done all sorts of listening to their team a little, but also to their prospects, their customers, their ex-customers. I'm not going to get too deep into that part today, but research and discovery is everything. That's where your messages will come from. It's where your messaging hierarchy, and a messaging hierarchy, if you're new to that, it's just the order that messages go in, and not just like on the page, but like which messages need to be seen first and which messages support those bigger messages. So your research will drive your messaging hierarchy. It will also drive the actual, oh, it's robot voice. Robot voice, okay, I get it. Okay. Robot voice passes. Is it passing? Dave Collins is here. I don't look like a robot. That was me doing my robot. Can I? No, I don't know how to do it. Okay, we're back now. That's good. And that all got recorded. Yay. Okay, so good. We're back. Awesome. So research and discovery, great. That's where we do most of our work as conversion copywriters because we are listening, we're eavesdropping. Then comes synthesizing everything we heard and turning that into written copy, like actual copy, and then wireframing that and editing in the awesome, as we like to say. The third step is validation and experimentation. A lot of people think, oh, this is where you A/B test. Oh no, my clients won't A/B test. What am I supposed to do? Validation is an important part of this. You can't always A/B test everything. So that's a big thing to know going into this as a conversion copywriter. And this is true whether you've been doing this for a while or not. You cannot A/B test everything. It's a beautiful dream, but it is only a dream. And there are problems with A/B testing. We won't get into that today either. But the goal in this third phase of your conversion copywriting process is to make sure you are putting the best possible version out for your one reader or your ideal prospect. Validation can help with that. So validating is putting copy in front of people who are likely to be your prospect. And that's to see about persuasion. Are you being pulled in, watching where people trail off? So this can be using click tracking and scroll mapping to see before it even goes live. But like put it out there on a landing page and drive traffic to that, actual domain that's kind of standing alone, see how it's going, see where people are being lost, etc., etc. 5-second test is another really good option here, where you can say, okay, we're worried about the clarity of the homepage headline or the landing page headline or the actual pricing area on the sales page. We're worried about clarity. We're worried, are we getting specific enough? 5-second test won't tell you if your message is persuasive, but it can tell you really good things like, did people even understand what that headline was about? So validation and experimentation is where you're saying, okay, here's the copy we have that's written based on all of this great voice of customer data, which is what we call it, voice of customer data, which is the research. All of this stuff fed it, but we still can't say for sure if this is going to be the absolute right version to go with, or if it's in its optimum state to actually launch it. So we're gonna go on 5-second test, get some quick gut reactions on clarity, on how specific things are, on whether images or ideas are sticking or images are kind of coming to life for people. They understand your value prop and can repeat it back to you and tell you what it means. That's what 5secondtest.com is really great for. That's the third phase. So this is the whole process. Yeah, Varun, sorry if I'm saying that wrong. 5-second test helps clarify the final offer for me. And that's great. It'll help with a lot of things having to do with clarity. Don't expect a lot more than that, but it can help you make sure. And if you're familiar with Tutorial Tuesdays, you'll know that we have the 7 sweeps. And the clarity sweep is always the #1 sweep. You want to always go over your copy and make sure that above all, it's clear. Above everything else, it's clear. So if 5-second test can help you with that, that's a huge win for you. And it can really point out problems that you have. Lander has a question here about missing the research and discovery discussion. We didn't really get too much into it, so don't worry, Lander. Do you guys use SEMrush for any research too? We didn't get into all the things we use for research, but absolutely, I don't use SEMrush, but I know others who do. Okay, cool. So that's the process. It is always, always, always your process without fail. Then I wanted to kind of touch on this because it's been coming up a lot, especially in our mastermind that we run. The writing itself. So when you do the research and discovery, you are likely to put together documents that like synthesize everything that you're hearing, your messaging hierarchy, all of the things that I already mentioned for that. But then when you sit down to write, I've seen some people do all that research and then still go over to a document and stare at the page and go like, okay, what? No. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that, and we actually can make it a bajillion times simpler than staring at the screen. And this is like, don't overcomplicate your job. Your job is to be extremely good at listening and then to make sure that at the end it sounds good. So that might sound like, what? Let me show you. So when you're actually writing the copy, what I do is I use 2 screens. That's it. I take the research that I've done and I put it on one half of the screen, and then I put my document on the other half of the screen. And then I look at the research. And let's say, so I'm going to do this right now. I'm going to pull this one out. Bear with me. I know everyone's like, don't you have a MacBook? There are smarter ways to do that. I don't know shortcuts. I don't do shortcuts. I make life hard. No, I don't. But I don't know what the shortcut is to make your screen go into 2 different things. So please don't get angry with me for being like, I didn't get training on my Mac. I'm just glad that my iPhone works with my MacBook. That's all. Okay, so I've got 2 things showing here now. As I mentioned, we have this survey that we run on the thank you page when you sign up for Copyhackers, where it asks what was going on in your life that brought you to sign up with Copyhackers today. This is one of the thank you surveys that we run based on where you sign up. And then we just have all the responses. So if I were to write copy for Copyhackers, for why you should choose Copyhackers, what the reasons are that people sign up for Copyhackers, then I could just sit here, open up my document itself, and let's say I was going to write a page for why new copywriters, or why, let's say I have a question about, okay, What do people think when they think copywriters and come to the site? So I'm gonna, oh, my keyboard, I keep forgetting that it's broken. So I have to use my laptop one. So I'm gonna just search copywriter. And this is just an example. You don't have to search, but I have to give you like a topic to write. So here's what I'd be writing about. So I search the word copywriter in our results. And I can go through, we are searching for a copywriter, and then someone writes 2 days ago, well, you see, I wanted to become a copywriter, but I gave up after seeing Alibaba's AI copywriting tool. I thought to myself, there's no point learning now. In just 2 years, that thing will murder all human copywriters. But I decided I couldn't let that scare me anymore. So I'm back. I'm here to fight the good fight. I want to serve the human race, sir. I want to defend all human copywriters. That is why I signed up. Now, you're not always going to get people who write things like that. Like, that's pretty awesome. Well done putting that response together. It makes it nice to go through survey results. It's not always going to be that way. But what we could do here, if we're writing a page that's supposed to maybe convince people to become a copywriter, or it's time to write a long form sales page to sell a program on becoming a copywriter, like brand new, you're not a copywriter, you want to figure out what to do, we would sit here and look at that exact line, maybe even copy it directly over, and then just paste it here and start actually just writing this into copy. Now that might sound like, what do you mean? Take this and use this as potentially not, I want to serve the human race, I want to defend all human copywriters, but maybe there's a section on the page that's about, like, if people have an objection to becoming a freelance copywriter or a new copywriter where they're like, well, aren't there bots that do this now? This becomes the core of what, I just tried to use my keyboard, of what we write in that section. I'm not going to sit here and dream up, what do people think when they're writing, when they're wondering if they should become a copywriter? That's never going to be useful. And I can come up with that and say, like, oh, they're wondering, will they get jobs? Will they make any money? But we're not ever going to get as deeply into what people are really thinking until we start going through the data itself. Now, we've taken what I'm showing here, this type form that I'm showing here, and we have exported it into a Google Doc, into a Google Sheet, and we go through it and we organize things and tag things, and we've cut this all up with the Air Story Researcher to tag things there as well. So it's not always going to be a matter of just like looking at this and copying and pasting. But very often it is simply a matter of having your research open on one side, identifying important pieces of it, which is the listening part of your job. You're there to listen, not to write. Identify the best, the most engaging stuff, the stuff that makes you pay attention, and then simply slightly revise that to turn it into copy. That's it. That's the whole job. That's 90% of the job. Then you go over and you do your sweeps and you make sure everything like pulls together in a non-disjointed kind of way. And that's your whole job. That's everything. That's simplifying it, I know, because it might be like when you sit down to do this, you're looking at this and going like, oh, but like how? How do I turn that into copy? And you might be like, okay, that actually isn't going to work as copy. But I wanted to become a copywriter, but I gave up. So I gave up after seeing Alibaba's AI copywriting tool. So we can just say, right, that could be a crosshead that introduces a section that's all about why you shouldn't give up on this. That might be an email we're writing when people are worried about whether they're going to be replaced by a bot of some kind. Point being, you don't sit there and just start writing. Split your screen in two and just take what people are saying and put it on the page. All right, I'm going to stop sharing now. That is the entire tutorial in a perfect 20 minutes as promised, but almost never delivered on because we almost always go over. So I hope that helps you. Again, 3 phases: research and discovery, writing, wireframing and editing, and validation and experimentation. Okay, now the questions that we have, if you have them, throw them in Q&A. Isaac says, how do you deal with a client that wants all email to be super short? Testing. So email is very, very easy to test. I don't know why, so I would dig into why they want all email to be super short. That's like question number 1. Help them diagnose their misconceptions, and then walk them through when short copy works well and when long copy works better. So you're there to coach your client through this. Remember, you're the expert. If your client doesn't recognize you as the expert, they might not be your client very long. That would be my take on it. I know that sounds like easier said than done because everybody has bills to pay and things like that. But be careful not to waste your energy. Let's say you've got 10 years as a copywriter and you give up 3 years of those to a client or many clients who are going to burn you out with really crazy ideas that are just like whipped up out of the clear blue sky. Like email should always be short. Just be careful not to let them take up too much of your space, because where did they get that idea from? Like, where did they get that idea from? Why do they believe that's true? Start there. Isaac then asks, yes, I wonder how exactly do you turn VOC data into actual copy? Would love to see an example someday. So I was going to show you an example today until I realized the example I was going to show you is protected by an NDA. So unfortunately, I realized that, and it's a really good example. So unfortunately, today isn't going to cover that, but another day down the road, I might even just ask the client if they're like cool with me showing people that, especially once their new copy goes live. But yes, I want to show you. I had every intention of showing you. I forget sometimes that I've signed NDAs. Okay, Reno asks, what are the 7 sweeps of your copy? The 7 sweeps are on copyhackers.com in the tutorials area, or any page you're on has a sidebar with links to tutorials in it. Scroll to the bottom of that sidebar. I know sometimes it's tricky because of the way that like sites are laid out, but scroll to the bottom of it and you'll see the 7 sweeps there. Cool. There's training on like each one of them, so easy peasy. Debbie says, not so on point, but I've been wondering in general about creativity in conversion copywriting. I noticed Rye's emails are incredibly fun and creative. You pop in these snappy lines and zany characters. How important is it to say things in a fresh, fun, entertaining way? So that's a branding thing, really. If you're speaking to enterprises, you may not want to go too crazy with the voice. You have to be really careful. Like, too much voice can make things feel a little cheaper sometimes. So, and that might sound like, what? How do you know? Well, this is like 15 years of watching this stuff happen. A lot of copywriters love to dive into, oh, the voice. Oh, I'm going to bring this to life with like this. I'm going to throw these like colloquialisms in, and it's going to sound like, oh, here's whatever. It can come off as, because it's heavy-handed, it comes off sometimes as slightly amateurish. So I think that it's a matter of doing your best to just walk that fine line. And if it feels like you're getting too zany, as you put it, pull back. Better to be less zany than too much. Now that again depends on your brand. So our Copyhackers emails, especially the ones that Rye writes, people really like them. Some people really like them and some people don't. I gave a talk at the Copywriter Club in real life in New York last February, where we listed out, we showed screenshots of people sending emails to us that were like, overwritten guff was a reply to one of the emails that we wrote. Things like that. Like some people will really like it and some people won't. So if you're cool with kind of polarizing people that way, it's not an aggressive polarization. Like we're not left versus right or some really weird thing going on. But just be careful. I would just say that just be careful. How important is it to say things in a fresh, fun, entertaining way? How important is it to your audience to hear things in that fresh, fun, entertaining way? Okay, Enrico says, how much is too much research? Is there such a thing? I haven't experienced there being too much research ever. You can feel overwhelmed by it, but we call our research process an immersive message finding process. And that's really like, almost like when actors get in character and then like stay in character and you hear about them like going into a coffee shop as like some Lord of the Rings character because they were in character. That's about like immersing yourself in it so that you can authentically produce in that. And that's the same kind of thing here. Can you really immerse yourself in just tons of insights into what prospects and customers are thinking and feeling, what they want, what the product can and cannot do for them. All of that kind of stuff. I've never experienced too much research. I've definitely felt the pains of too little though. Debbie says, how about a little more info on wireframing? We get into wireframing in my mastermind and in the 10X Freelance Copywriter. I can definitely do that. I have moved over the years away from lo-fi wireframes to producing more high fidelity wireframes. So they tend to look more like a completed page with just like places where images should go and then instruction on what that image should be, but everything else is largely done. So I can do that. I think it's just a matter of identifying where people need to be. I guess we just start out with early wireframing, but that's something that we can definitely put in an upcoming tutorial. Thanks, Debbie. Sarah says, how much weight do you place on SEO as a web copywriter? So I don't identify as a web copywriter, just as a note. You might be like, well, semantics, but it's kind of not because it's my role. So a web copywriter is worried about things like SEO. It also feels like kind of an old term though, just as like a side note for me, as someone who lives and breathes this stuff 24/7 for 15 years. So as a conversion copywriter though, or even as somebody who's just in digital marketing, SEO is a consideration. It's rarely up there for me in the considerations though. There are many, many ways to get traffic to a page and to your site. Many ways, many great ways. Some of them not that affordable, others affordable. What happens when you get them there? I'm worried about once they're on that page, are they going to be convinced and convert, say yes to us in some way? So for me, I'm not that worried about it. Other people, maybe those who do identify as a web copywriter, would put it further up. I know that when I was called senior web copywriter at Intuit a bajillion years ago, SEO was something I worked very closely with the SEO team on everything all the time. But I also worked with the legal team on everything all the time. So you have a lot of considerations when you're writing copy. Anne says, moving this to Q&A, whoops, are there any tips about how to conduct good research to make sure you have a lot to work off of? So I know there was chat about, I just saw the comment about Bob Bly, Sonia, that's so funny. I still think about that fondly. Yeah, so we get into this in copy school, quite a bit into the research that you can get into. Our first book, which is available free on copyhackers.com, is called Where Stellar Messages Come From, and it is all about research. Now, it's 7 years old, and some of it is outdated, like usertesting.com is sort of a pain in the ass these days. Their pricing is just like, it doesn't even work for small businesses at all anymore. Like you have to be an enterprise to get anything. So things like that are slightly outdated. But yeah, I would start with that free ebook, go there, and then we'll do other tutorials on that. But you want to do surveys, interviews that you get transcribed, all sorts of it. You can go through chat transcripts, things like that. There's so much to do. But we want to make sure that we're focusing on learning so that we can write better copy, not learning for the sake of learning. So only focus on things that actually matter to what you're trying to write, which means you don't necessarily have to say, okay, show me your Google Analytics when you're writing a long form sales page. You could just ask the team for like the 1 or 2 data points you might need, instead of like going into someone's GA and wasting a lot of time in there when you could just ask someone else to pull a report for you with the little pieces that you might need. So more to follow on that. Debbie says, is there a difference between emails and web pages in this aspect? I assume that means like when it comes to writing this way? Nope. Nope. It's all writing the stuff. Follow that process and don't sit there and stare at the page. Templates, like we're not talking in this. When we get into writing, wireframing, and editing, that includes using templates, using frameworks, getting into more of the formulas and things. That all happens in the writing, wireframing, and editing process. So if you're like, well, when I'm writing templates, you guys teach us all sorts of, I'm writing emails and you guys teach us all sorts of templates or theme plates. Yeah, it's true. And you should use those when you're actually in the writing process. But the parts that fill in those templates should come from voice of customer data. Michael says, could I walk you through how we wireframe? And yes, in another tutorial, I will. I will put that on the list probably in October or November. So stay tuned. But yes, and then Sarah says, what software do I use? I wireframe in Photoshop, actually. I think it's one of those things where I've taught myself how to do it. And I'm like, it's like, you can picture like roots like pulling you down. Like there's no way for me to escape Photoshop now. Like I have to use it. But that's what I use. I used Balsamic for wireframing when I first started wireframing. And then that was before they had their nice switch to like get away from the sketch look and turn on the like cleanup like UI look, which is much nicer to work in. So I switched away from that, from Balsamic early on because it looked so sketch-like, which is the point, but clients, it didn't look right for some of the clients I was working with. So I switched to Photoshop and now Balsamic is better anyway. I don't use Sketch, I don't understand it. Barbara says, how much time do you allocate to research? I've got, depends. I've got a tech client who works at the speed of light and wants things turned around rapidly. I feel your pain. Right now I'm a bit overwhelmed with all the research I've got, but wish I'd asked for more time to process it. So we just went through this intensive, for a very cool tech company, a 2-week sprint to do a ton of research and develop value proposition options for them. 2 weeks is nothing. I would never agree to that, but I was like, I'm up for the challenge, which was crazy because I just like, it ages you. But yeah, how much time can you get? So it depends how you work, right? Like if you're somebody who, if you have 4 weeks to do something, you'll do it all like the night before it's due. If that's how you've worked traditionally, then shorten up that period anyway. So you just like get down to work. But I tend to find that the research is like, I think of it in like circles. So the research circle is this big, the writing and wireframing is this big, and then validation and experimentation is maybe a little bit smaller. But the research is a huge amount. Now, the more you work with a client, the smaller that research kind of balloon gets, and the bigger other ones may get in comparison to it. But research is everything. So it's time well spent. We look at the process and we keep research separate from writing, but they kind of, you should start with research, but research is writing. It's still part of, like, it's fully part of writing. So don't worry too much about, oh, I'm spending so much time on research, because that's time well spent. That's actual writing work that you're doing in there. Corbett says, how do you use AirStory for wireframing? We don't. AirStory is not built for that. It's built for turning your notes into long copy and content. Montreal says, in general, how long does the entire process take? For example, a typical blog post. So this one isn't about writing a blog post, but you could absolutely use this for writing a blog post, but you'd likely capture and document the sources. So not necessarily from a survey, like you could say whatever, but a blog post isn't, a blog post is like an article or an essay. You might be persuading people with it, but it's not there with the explicit intent of trying to get people to say yes to a conversion metric of some kind, like opting in or paying, buying, things like that. So it's kind of a hard one to answer, Montreal. We're really focusing more on copy that converts rather than content. Sarah says, when you wireframe, do you leave it with the client? Sorry, I just saw a whole bunch of things coming in. Oh, mofo. Oh, are you guys still talking about that? That's amazing. Yeah, okay, sorry I got distracted, but for those who are watching the replay, there is a good amount of chat going on about an interaction that I had with Mr. Bob Bly, a legendary copywriter, when I wrote a post for Copyblogger. Mr. Bly left a comment that I did not feel was very productive, but I didn't say much. Others jumped to my defense. As Sonia says, Bob felt that the word mofo, which I use in my like byline, the time we were saying, Copyhackers teaches startups to convert like mofos or something, or where startups learn to convert like mofos. Mofo is just a word that I say. Like, I'm a big U2 fan. Back on Pop, the album, one of their songs was called Mofo, and I think I was like 17 and I didn't know any better, and I was like, oh, mofo, that's a thing. And it just became part of how I talk and think, and I didn't question it. And Mr. Bly questioned it. So that was fun. Anyway, that's a side note if you're watching the replay. Okay, so Sarah says, when you wireframe, do you leave it with the client to bring to the web developer designer, or do you work with the developer designer yourself? Work with them yourself. Present, ideally when you present your wired copy, and we get into copy presentations and other tutorials, so go through the library of tutorials for presenting your copy. But when you do your best to have the designer in the room when you're presenting the copy, so you can say like, this is a lo-fi wireframe. We just want to note that this is not design, but it is a lo-fi wireframe. And then just work directly with them. Most of the time you'll already have had discussions with the designer along the way. So there shouldn't be like a weird feeling of, you're coming in and stepping on my territory. Like it shouldn't get to that. Manuel finishes off our questions with the perfect finisher. Will there be a replay for this tutorial? There will. All of our tutorials, almost all of them, are recorded and shared in our tutorial library on copyhackers.com. And if Sarah's tech were working, she would now chat out that link. But you can go to copyhackers.com and just search in the search bar tutorials, and you will get almost all of our past tutorials, including this one. It will be up later today. That is our hope. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Mofo hackers. Yes. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for chiming in and all this cool chat that was happening over here as well. I really hope that this process helps you if you're newer to conversion copywriting, or if you were just kind of wondering what the difference is between like conversion copywriting and kind of more traditional copywriting. This should be a good start for you. We will see you in our next tutorial Tuesday. The week after that, I believe I am away in Dublin. So there'll be a break, but not next week. I'll be here next week, and we will see you then. Thanks, everyone.